I'll let you know when we're set.
Okay. Okay, this is Woodbury County Zoning Commission, Monday, April 26th, 2021 at 6 p.m. We have on the agenda call to order, which we're doing, and roll call.
Okay, I will confirm for the record that the four zoning commissioners are present in the room, and Chairperson Zomer Zamp is calling in from the teleconference. Department Director David Weiser is here, as well as myself. So just to state the names, Jeff O'Toole is here, Corey Meister, Tom Bryan, and Mark Parker as well as other commissioners.
Okay, the next item we have on the agenda is the public comment on matters not on the agenda. Item number 3.
Since this is our first in-person meeting, let's go around the room and give introductions. We've got a few folks that are new to the group. So Commissioner Parker, could we go ahead and start us off, please?
I'm Barb Parker. I've been on the commission for, I think 5 years.
Tom Bride, and I've been on 7, I think.
Corey Meister.
Jeff O'Toole. Yes, I've been on since December.
Welcome, nice to see you.
It's nice to finally see everybody and have a name with a face. Face have a name,
Absolutely.
whatever.
Looks like I'm better with my mask on.
I look better on the phone. I don't think we have any other matters that are not listed on the agenda.
Okay, item number 4, approval of the minutes of February 22nd, 2021 and March 15th of 2021. Do you want to do them consecutively or in combination?
You could do it together as a slate or separately, however you prefer.
Okay.
I would make a motion to approve them.
Both minutes,
Yes.
both days. I will second that motion to approve the meeting of February 22nd and March 15th.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any corrections or other discussion on those minutes? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of approving the minutes of February 22nd and March 15th, 2021, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Do you need roll call or is that good enough?
Let's just, how do you vote, Chairperson?
Aye.
All right, then there
Passes unanimously.
Okay, so the next item of business is the review of the draft commercial wind energy ordinance proposal.
Okay, so it was a few months ago that we started to work. Well, how many months ago was it, Dan? Almost a year.
Yeah, it could have been.
It's been about a year, I suppose, since county engineer called Dan and I and asked us to get with the county attorney's office and start working on an ordinance because we feel like, well, we've gotten phone calls from some wind energy companies, and then also Cherokee County has just cited one within the last couple of years. It was a fairly large wind farm, but they're getting closer. And, you know, in this part of the state, with the changes and the advances in technology and the turbines, they're able to capture more energy with less wind. And so this part of the area of the state, which, you know, years ago wasn't really looked at as a favorable location for wind, is now getting some looks at. And so there's, you know, undeniable benefits of wind energy. And, you know, in Iowa, we're a leader in the country. We generate more electricity ourselves than any other state in the country. It's great for our economy. It pays, you know, it creates a lot of jobs. They pay good wages. It's one of the fastest growing occupations in the country. And it pays money to individual landowners and significant tax revenues to local jurisdictions. And like I said, it's the technology is only getting better, and they are repowering older wind turbines that are hitting that 20-year mark. So across the state, they are repowering these systems and taking them down, putting new ones up. And, you know, not only does the state of Iowa have a energy consumption carbon reduction goal, but so does our local utility. Mid-American Energy is committed to being 100% renewable in the near future. They're making, you know, substantial investments in solar down in Port Neal, and they're also very much interested in, you know, in bringing more wind energy to Woodbury County. So what we did is we looked at the Iowa Environmental Council's document called the Successful County Wind Siting Practices document. You guys not
Can I
get, we don't.
I don't think we
Is that the
can.
addendum that was sent out there?
Yes, I'll go run some copies off that real quick for you.
We don't.
Let me make a copy.
The one on the email was, actually this, here, yeah, that is the suggestion.
Oh, I didn't really see that.
It just came late.
Let me grab some copies real quick.
On page 8, page 4, of it, the tower height.
Hey, Chris, this is Dan Priestley. In the 5 o'clock hour, I had sent out an email to a handout. Just want to make sure you had a chance to pull that over.
The way this was written.
I did get an email with an attachment about 5 o'clock.
Which paragraph?
Yes, okay, that's what we'll be referring
One has a
to.
big number 8 on the bottom, and be the 1, 2, 3. The fourth full paragraph says tower height.
Okay.
It just doesn't,
You think it should say including,
yes, it says that
exclusive?
exclusive of the rotor blades, when measured from the ground to the tip of the blade, it just doesn't.
Oh, that doesn't make sense. Hey, Chris, we're looking at
Yeah.
page 8. Page 8 is actually page 4 of the Woodbury County, the wind ordinance. And it's the fourth paragraph, tower height.
Okay.
We're not really crazy about the wording on there. It says the total height of a turbine exclusive of the rotor blades as measured from the ground to the tip of the blade when fully extended,
Should probably be inclusive
inclusive of the blades.
or something. I mean, yeah, it doesn't make sense because they're excluding it, but it's from the ground to the tip of the blade.
Right.
So I don't think we need exclusive of the rotor blades at all. I think that could be, that's a good catch there.
Sorry about that, guys.
Thanks for doing that.
Yeah.
I totally missed that.
Sorry about that. So, in you know, consulting with the Iowa Environmental Council and other counties across the state, the real meat and potatoes of these ordinances are really related to how are they going to be processed? Is it going to be either a conditional use, or is it just going to be a straight outright permitted allowed use? And so, you know, if it was an allowed use, an applicant, a company would come to our department and work with Dan and I, work with staff directly, and fill out an application and get a permit just like a normal building permit. So there would be no public hearings, there'd be no notices, none of that. If we set it up as a conditional use, there's a couple of different options. We can set it up as a conditional use, just the same as all of our conditional use permits are done. You know, we would notice a meeting for the zoning commission. They would review it and make a recommendation to the Board of Adjustment. And then the Board of Adjustment would hear and decide on those applications. That's one way to set it up. Another way that some counties in the state have done it is through the home rule code. And that would be a standalone ordinance, so it would not be in the zoning ordinance whatsoever. And it would basically have the Board of Supervisors approve it here and decide it. The staff would, work with the applicant, receive the filed application, and provide a staff report or a final report to the Board of Supervisors. We would notice a hearing, and then a public hearing would be held, and the supervisors would decide. So those are some options. And then the last real thing on there is setback distances. And what we did is we took Kossuth County, their wind energy conversion ordinance, which is kind of known in the state of Iowa as the most conservative in terms of setback distances and other requirements that they put in there, such as a decommissioning plan, a road use repair agreement, and some other safety requirements related to wiring and towers and stuff like that. So Dan, myself, county engineer, and Joshua from the county attorney's office worked on a draft. This is probably the third or fourth revision that we've come up with, but they believe we feel that the supervisors are going to want to make that decision. But I would like your guys' input on what you think in terms of that process.
I have a question about that. It says generating a capacity of more than 100 kW.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how many wind turbines that is.
Mm-hmm.
Good, I don't either. That's a good question.
Yeah, that kind of stuff I really don't know either.
Because to me, that makes a lot of difference, whether it's standalone or if it's there, if a person puts up their own wind turbine and then decides wants another one,
Mm-hmm.
at what point does it get to that threshold?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's, if we don't know that, then we're not making a good decision. I don't know,
I like that, yeah.
I would agree with that.
Well, the amount of energy produced, the total nameplate production, I don't know what that looks like per se, or how many houses that could light up, or what that, looks like. But it's something that I feel, or that is obviously understood in terms of the manufacturer and the engineers.
I would assume that a tower could generate that,
Yes,
one tower.
one tower could, it just depends on.
Yeah, because I know a small one over by us years ago was a 30 kW. That was a small tower by the radio station on Buchanan.
okay.
So I think they're considering it commercial once you get to the units that are 100 kW or higher.
So it could, okay.
And
So like
it might be
residential-
20 of them, but I'm assuming anything under 100 kW for a unit, like if I was gonna put one up, wouldn't be considered a commercial
Okay.
generated
So
tower.
residential.
Yes.
I know Hog Buildings, 3 units with a farm site will put up a 60 or 75,000 kW.
Okay.
So that's, if that gives you a little idea, but the ones you see over by, what is it, Ida Grove, Jeff, I'm assuming those are
Yeah, Storm Lake.
100, 150, 200,
And that's why we didn't want to get into restricting tower height. And that's why we went with a percentage on the setback based on the height of the tower. So that way, we don't get in a situation where the setbacks are way bigger than they need to be. There was consensus amongst, the staff that conservation areas, we would defer to the greater of either the 110% of the tower height or 600 feet, whichever is greater. And then on the public right-of-ways, open ditches, tiles, we went with the most conservative ones that were listed across the state. The state has a list of what other counties do for setbacks and distances and the types of ways that it's set up. And so I would just let you know that the majority of counties in Iowa that have these ordinances do it as a conditional use. It's kind of a mixed bag about who's, Board of Supervisors or Board of Adjustments approves it. That's a local decision. And other than that, I mean, that's pretty much what we're looking for feedback on is, do you guys think they should be, just outright permitted? Or do you think there should be a conditional use process? And do you think the zoning commission and board of adjustment should review it and decide it? Or we'll let the board of supervisors?
So because it's so new to us, I mean, would it be beneficial to use a conditional use and just till we know what we're getting into? Does that make sense?
I think it seems like the consensus from the work group that put this together is that definitely a conditional use. It didn't seem like anybody just wanted to outright allow it without.
That makes sense to me. If I said it a little more.
Especially if you need some of these public notice, because I know in Ivy County it was a messy deal for some people down there, and that's what happens.
And I think because if it's a conditional use, then, it does run through the zoning board, board of adjustment, and then goes to the supervisors for a final approval. Would be the process. It wouldn't even have to go to the supervisors.
No,
for final
it wouldn't
approval.
go to supervisors.
But you still have two independent groups that aren't viewed maybe as influenced or driven.
Gives another layer.
Right, I think the public would feel better that, I just,
I like that too.
and then also with the conditional use, you wouldn't probably have to be as restrictive of the areas, whether it's ag preservation or light industrial. You might be able to open that up just a little more because maybe there is a spot that you don't pay attention to that would work for, I don't want to say ag residential because it probably won't, but it could. There's areas that might not become developed residentially that would work.
I do know that in order for us to do, in order for the supervisors to review and approve those, it would have to be a standalone ordinance.
Okay.
And that would have to go under the home rule code section of the state. And we would have to eliminate any reference to zoning district designations. And I do have this, the way it's written right now, it says that it's a conditional use approved by the board of supervisors in certain zoning districts. We'd have to erase that. But if the zoning commission and the board of adjustment review it, then we need to put that language in the zoning ordinance. But I understand what you're saying, and I could talk to Joshua as well and ask. That's something that I talked to him right before we had the meeting. Was I polled the supervisors kind of just informally today and said, what would you like to see that process look like? And the responses I received seemed like they want someone to kind of do that initial vetting, kind of like they do subdivisions. I think they like that staff report and the recommendation. And the way that this is written, the staff do that. And I asked Joshua if we can set it up so the zoning commission would take that initial review and make a recommendation to the board of supervisors. I don't, do I get the sense that you guys feel like the zoning commission and board of adjustment should be involved?
I really do.
Okay.
I agree.
Well, I will relay that and just gonna remind you folks that supervisors ultimately decide what they want to do.
Right.
So we can tell them, all these things and they can say, yeah. But, and then as far as the setbacks,
I was really pleased with the setback.
okay,
I
good.
like the percentage versus all the strict numbers.
And then we don't have to get into, amending it if newer ones come out or things change.
Right, I really did like that.
I also like the requirement for the decommissioning stuff. I mean,
Yeah, I did too.
people end up, when they build something, you have no plan to.
I hadn't thought about that either until I read that. I was like, oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
So that was the county engineer's biggest concern out of all of this, is that the impacts that the roads take when these things are built.
Yeah.
And so we put in a pretty thorough requirement about doing a pre-construction survey or report, so the county engineer and the company would go out and travel the roads that they're gonna be using and take that baseline and make sure that they have the financial securities in place to do these things. And so performance bonds and all those sorts of things are in there. County finance director is responsible for that. And I'm trying to think of.
I just thought about if they sell it, it has to be approved by if they transition ownership, has to be approved also.
Yes. And there was one other section that I know a lot of other counties didn't have that we put in there. Oh, the ancillary agreements, and so that's the road repair agreements.
So are there counties currently using a plan very similar to this that you know of, or?
Yeah, I'd say, I remember reading, they said out of 99 counties in Iowa, over 50% of them have wind farms, and the majority of those have these ordinances. Some counties don't have zoning at all.
Really?
Yeah. And, yeah, and so I just learned about a number of court cases in Iowa that counties are involved in because of, not covering all of their bases. So Joshua and Mark feel very comfortable with this. It's just the process that they want to get consensus on.
There was, you had a point, the one,
This didn't make sense to me as tower height statement. That. Should be inclusive of the order below, or get rid, or strike that section right there. On page 8, on page 4 of the ordinance. We talked about it when you're making copies.
it just doesn't, it's either one or the other, not both. I mean,
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
and I'm assuming it's to include the height of the blade,
Yeah, you would.
not to exclude it. Because if a fall path, Possibly.
I'll just strike that exclusive.
Yeah,
Okay, good.
I mean, that would make sense, because you gotta count the full height of the tower.
You can't
Blades.
exclude the rotor blades when you're measuring the tip of it.
Yeah. Another thing too, I was gonna bring up is under the decommissioning, where it's 4 feet below ground level. I know, I can't think of his name right now, but we talked one time on that, and they've had some counties that have required the decommissioning provision with a bond or something, but he told me that those footings, it could be 15 feet deep. So I don't know if that's something, because he said there's been some issues with that.
Okay.
Where, they haven't, they just remove them so many feet and then cover it with dirt, and then you got 100 and some yards of concrete underground. I don't know if that's a deal the landowner needs to work out or.
You're surprised when you found that in the future.
Well, yeah, I mean, he was pretty clear that that's an issue that could cause some problems, and that's.
Do they even put up those towers that look like the Eiffel Tower on the floor?
I've seen some I don't know where, it wasn't around here.
Storm Lake had those.
Okay.
They were the first ones.
I saw
But I've seen a new field up, might have been in Minnesota, and it was a new field that was doing that. And that was weird, it surprised me.
I worked a couple contracts on those at Storm Lake.
Okay.
Those was about way deeper than 15.
Okay.
Okay.
They were,
Probably a piling type
Yeah,
setup.
not, because the monopole ones, those are a different type of footing.
Yep.
Okay.
So I don't know if it makes a difference or what type of. Sure.
You know, it depends, I mean, but the thing is, you don't want somebody stuck with that
Yeah,
down the road and then saying, well, you guys only required a 4-foot removal, and
okay.
Would be a good depth.
I don't know, I mean, like I said, and I don't know if that's a situation where you need to get the landowner involved to start with, that you realize they're doing this, and that means this is never gonna be used for anything other than the 4-foot depth requirement. I just wanted to point that out, that was something brought up at a meeting that they've had issues with.
Okay, well, that's good to know, and we'll research that depth, and find out, like, you know, what's the industry standard, or what's the best practice recommendation. And then ultimately, you know, this stuff is a local decision too, so if there are things that you guys feel like we should beef up or, you know, strengthen or whatever, we can do that.
Has Joshua talked the best way to assure that the removal, whether it's a bonding type situation or what?
Yes, and that's where we would have the performance bond.
Okay.
And have Dennis do that, and that would be something that Mark and Dennis would primarily be involved in. But we will research that. Is there anything else in there that you guys noticed?
I guess I'd like to comment, I like the condemnation waiver. A question I had on that part was, is that to include municipalities too,
Yes.
if they come outside the city? Okay,
Yes.
I like that.
Awesome.
Was there any stipulation on the wiring from tower to tower?
It's supposed to be underground.
Yeah, I didn't know
It's mentioned both though.
like how deep, or when it comes to roads, or going under the roads, or, you know, a board underneath, or just plow through, or.
I remember that they're supposed to be underground.
Thought there was a provision possibly of an exemption.
Yeah,
if it-
there was.
But I think the point you're making too is for the utilities hooking up on roads and stuff, or right of way. But that I assume the county still has control over anything in the right of way, no matter what.
We also, in here, the ancillary agreements, we just reinforce the fact that all electrical codes and standards need to meet the national electrical code, and building codes need to meet the states.
And the reason I brought that up, the towers in BV County, when I worked on a couple of those contracts, we bored under each road and under each stream. You can plow right through a gravel road, you know, and that kind of doesn't make that road so good anymore.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I'm getting at. I think that's a good point, to either, if it's not in there, or if I assume, like I said, the county has the control of whether they plow through a road or not, but you should probably spell it out in there that.
Okay.
Or drainage.
Right, that's,
So, okay, restate that, how am I gonna?
How is power going to be handled at road crossings?
Okay.
You can bore underneath so you don't disturb the road bed.
and I'd go even further, just put in the public right of way.
Okay.
Any
Are you
area.
referring to item number 6 on page 11? You want expansion?
What was it? I didn't get that.
I'm 6 on Pinyon Lane.
Yes, Chris, that's what we're talking about.
Okay.
And so what we're gonna do, Chris, is we're gonna do a little research and find out more about power lines at road crossings or in the right of way, depth, installation, stuff like that. And maybe, yeah, and then we'll probably go ahead and beef that language up and add it in here in this section. I think that's where it makes sense.
I assume Mark has an idea of something to do there to protect.
Yes, and he was supposed to be on the phone today, this evening, but I'm not sure what's going on, so.
But there again, you don't want to assume.
We'll also present the same information to the Board of Adjustment too.
So really, you're just trying to get us our, you don't want our approval. You just want to know what we're thinking about for the
Yeah, I mean,
building
like,
permit process.
that, I mean, I guess, what's your overall, feedback on this, the way it's proposed, knowing that you can do it other ways, if you have suggestions, or if you think, like, I'm gonna let the Board of Supervisors know that zoning commission would like to be involved, and they do believe that, having the Board of Adjustment, make that decision, or if it's a standalone ordinance and we can use the zoning commission, make the recommendation to the supervisors, we'll do that. I thought that the Board of Supervisors would say, let those guys make that decision, because then it takes the target off their back.
I just like that if it goes through the process through, the zoning commission and the board of adjustment, the public knows what's going on
Yes, yes.
before it happens.
Good point, Chris.
And initially, Mark and Joshua liked the idea of us noticing the receipt of an application, which I kind of personally felt like was just a little too much overkill, because, then we got to publish a notice that we just received an application. It's not even that,
Yeah,
that the application's been,
Yeah.
that it's complete or anything. And so anyways, the Iowa Environmental Council did not recommend that either. But Mark and Joshua, just want to be fully transparent, and so do I, but I just feel like, personally, I didn't like that.
It's over the top.
there should be adequate notice going through the regular conditional use permit process.
Yeah. That's kind of how I felt too. And so if that's, if you guys don't have anything else, I will pass that information on. We will do our homework and come back to you and let you know what we find out. And if we make any changes, I'll make sure that you guys see those. And I'll also let you know what the Board of Adjustment says. And we'll let you know when we present this to the supervisors, and, give you an invitation if you want to attend that meeting as well.
Great.
This is just a point I guess I would bring up. Sorry, Chris.
No, that's okay.
Everything that's not commercial, currently, we don't have an ability for that. We had a guy in here the one time, remember, he wanted a 12-foot unit. There isn't a path really for that. Are we gonna do something there too?
Yeah, the first time that we wrote this ordinance, we had it set up where it was gonna do residential, ag, commercial, and industrial. With the strengthened ag exemption law that was passed last year, I don't think we could apply those requirements to farmers who want to put them up for ag purposes. And it is listed in our land use summary table for residential or private use, like small production. And so it's listed in there as a conditional use in all zoning districts. And I think that, outside of property line setback, outside of your regular setbacks, it's the committee, I think that staff would be able to come up with the right questions during the application process to feed the commission, enough information to make a decision. So we would ask them to send us the OEM manufacturer's report. What is the fall zone? How are you going to connect it to the grid?
Tower height.
What was the guy's reason that we didn't allow it, or didn't, do you remember when he was in? And it was like one you could buy at Menards.
I mean, we didn't allow it though.
No, and I don't know, the guy, when we were talking to him, it was like a kit you bought at Menards that he couldn't put up. And that's why I was kind of wondering, is there a way that we can make that an easier path for something like that.
Yeah, I think that we could
That
definitely.
falls between this and what we currently have or do.
In our existing zoning ordinance, we can make amendments to that, to strengthen those requirements for those uses. Or we could, separate them out, so. But, yeah, I guess we'll have to see what the supervisors want, if they want to stand alone for the commercial, or if they want to put that commercial in the zoning ordinance. And if they want to put it in the zoning ordinance, then we'll make some other amendments to address residential and small commercial use. But basically, it's going to be defined on that 100 kilowatt nameplate production. If the total project is below 100, then, you don't have to get a commercial permit. It's just a conditional.
Well,
use.
good examples, when we were talking before about what it is, a 50 kW tower is about $190,000 cost.
Okay.
So you're going to get some separation just because it's out the window for a backyard residential system, so.
Take you a little time to build that.
Yeah,
Get you paid back. Live a long life.
All right, well, that was really helpful, and that's pretty much all I needed from you folks, unless you have any other questions or comments. I know Dan's should be a lot easier because the state requires us to approve their floodplain ordinance. So basically, Dan, what does the state want us to approve?
Okay, basically, this was brought to the zoning commission last year before COVID, back in January. And kind of in a nutshell, we're on the we've been saying 18 months for probably 5 months now, but we've been on the 18-month clock to have the floodplain maps retooled under 2-foot LiDAR technology. And FEMA and the DNR do require, with anticipation of adopting that new flood map, that we have to have an ordinance up to date that should coincide with those maps. Talking with the state official, Bill Cappuccio, he says it's much better for the process to go along smoother to adopt the ordinance ahead of time under the current maps. And so basically, in a nutshell, what happens is, this is the classic lesson of federalism, where each level of government is involved, and we get down to the level closest to the people, where we have to accept basically like a federal mandate. And so what Bill Cappuccio, kind of in the middle of it, is the state negotiates with the federal a lot of what is fits the best for the state of Iowa. And Bill has looked at several things that were highlighted in your packet based on the questions that were raised a year ago in January. And what a lot of their changes look very cosmetic to us. But what has happened is the state of Iowa has had flood policies in place even before the NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Program, has been modified through the years. And so what a lot of times I try to do is consolidate language so that language matches. For example, you'll see sprinkled through the ordinance terminology that was brought up a year ago using the term base flood versus using 100-year flood. And in my conversations with Cappuccio is that that's just bringing us under the federal terminology, as the term base flood references the 100-year flood within the respective definition. Therefore, it's just a synonym and kind of a cosmetic change. Based on the questions that were asked last year, it was brought up the definition of maximum damage potential. And this construes the 500-year flood, and when it is required to elevate over 100-year flood. And again, the level of government, the DNR has actively taken over the permitting process when it comes to larger institutions that have a large number of people in them. For example, a hospital would have to be protected under a stronger guideline than the 100-year flood. Therefore, they would be elevating the base flood over the 500-year flood. And so they have taken care of that permitting level, but now, through those discussions with FEMA and everything, they want that in the local ordinance. They want it in the local ordinance that, yes, a hospital has to meet that maximum damage potential. So that's the rationale behind that one. The next thing that was kind of brought up was the discussion about the exemption of the accessory structure. FEMA has long been in a tug of war with the DNR on that very issue. And so the state of Iowa has kind of, Bill has mentioned sort of, I don't want to say win the argument, but kind of push back a bit, because if FEMA had their entire way, there would be no exemptions. And so kind of the consensus that the state worked with is putting a level of square footage on the structure that could be exempt. So what they're doing is, right now, you can have an exemption for whatever square feet, but now, under the new ordinance, they put 600 square feet in. And what that exemption is you don't have to elevate the structure, but the language in the ordinance says the assets of value would still need to be elevated. Therefore, like if you have electrical or furnace or any of those type of things, those would mathematically have to be above the VFE, while the structure itself would remain at the natural ground level. And they also have some language in there too about the holes or the pass-through, the two holes on the wall. Basically, those would need to be in place basically too. And what I want to mention about that, more so transitioning from the exemption, is Bill has said that these ordinances are geared heavily toward the insurance in itself. So the way the policies are written up, it has a major influence on much of what this language is. And you'll see that kind of reflected there in the non-residential structures opening walls on page 69 of the packet and the PowerPoint. Another thing that's very cosmetic that I asked Bill, the word building versus structure. Basically, as it states, as I referenced before, there's been ordinances, policies out there forever, and this is about consolidating and following the same term that the DNR and FEMA have a standard on. So Iowa regulations that often refer to building instead of structure, and so this term structure is basically another way of the community following FEMA. The next issue is the grain storage, the bins and everything following under the floodplain regulations. And it's quite simple, their rationale. Grain bins are structures of value. They have valuable assets in them. The contents in the bins are valuable. And these need to be, under rules, protected under the NFIP program. And Bill gave this example the other day in preparation of the packet. He said, if grain is used as collateral on a loan, a bank would need to be assured that it's protected from flooding. And so that's why that is in there. And that slide goes on and kind of, we touched on the BFE language. There was a question that popped up last January about the datums, the NGVD versus the NAVD. And basically, these are just the mechanisms used to determine what the elevations are and the respective BFEs are. And Woodbury County uses the NAVD 88, which is in our flood study itself. And so that's what basically, if somebody calls a surveyor out to calculate that data, they're using it off of that standard. The other question that came up a year ago was the lowest floor not used for human habitation. This kind of talks about that crawl space. The lowest floor on any structure has to be elevated above the base flood elevation. So if somebody's in a floodplain and they want to end up building a house that has a basement, and then we tell you, wait, if you're going to have a basement, you're going to have to find out a way to elevate that basement above the base flood elevations. And if you know that can have a major impact on how somebody would design a home, a facility, and they find that the basement is not feasible based on what those elevations are. The word crawl space comes in there because you can't convert, according to the regulations, a crawl space into some type of area where there would be human habitation. So one of the small areas that the county can decide on is, do you want to require somebody to sign an agreement that no human being will not reside or camp out in that crawl space? It's wrong either way, but that's one of the few things that they kind of mentioned in the language. That
We get points for the CRS if we do that?
if we do that, that would be added to CRS as well.
There's a thing called a community rating system, and so anybody in Woodbury County that has flood insurance, there are certain things that Woodbury County can do that can help people get a discount on their flood insurance. And so that's a goal of ours as a department for the county. We would like to try to score folks some discount points. There are things that that we are doing that we can earn points for. So we're going to submit that. I don't know about that one. Yeah.
Based on where we were at last year, just so you know, with the packets and everything, we gave you the Iowa, the official wording that is required. Now, that wording has to be adopted either way, whether we adopt some optional language or do not add the extra criteria. Based on the feedback that I picked up on listening to the meeting, because I wasn't at that meeting last year, but I was able to read through the minutes and watch the video of everybody. And what I felt was, what we got out of that was kind of taking it to the regulatory or the minimum standard on the ordinance.
The least restrictive.
So the least restrictive for the property owner. And so in your packet, I did include a way that, or some language on how it would look if we just dropped it in the ordinance and adopted it. And again, with the federalism aspect, we don't have as much control as we would like in terms of, adopting the document. It comes down to that. So that's why that respective language was put into place. But other than that, that's kind of the general summary of what is going on there. I will say that we do have a very good DNR in terms of the flood department. I have a lot of respect for Bill Petruccio, the coordinator. He's been a very good guide on kind of taking these questions. He'll take any question basically and dissect it for me just in minutes. And so he's an excellent resource, but it is his recommendation that we do take this up and adopt it to make the rest of the process go smoother. Now, if we take this from the zoning commission and then put it into a public hearing and come out with a recommendation for this commission, it has to go back to the DNR before the supervisors can pick it up under their regulatory powers. And basically, they have to ensure that it meets their guidelines and FEMA's guidelines. It's sort of like FEMA creates the rules, they're the enforcer, and so they make sure we get that, put into place.
How does House File 2512 signed into law, how does that impact, or does it impact anything within this?
Which one?
The
Ag exemption law.
Does that have any impact on anything within here?
Here's kind of what it does. I'll try to get your question directly. It creates a challenge, at least from our part, now that somebody can go put a structure up, and it takes our ability, now that we can't collect a permit, to say, wait a minute, you're in floodplain. And so it's kind of harder now because we don't know necessarily what's going on in the farmer's life or business, et cetera, to come back and approach us. So it has left us in that whole good faith thing where, a good citizen would come and probably say, hey, I'm looking at doing this. And we still do. We have farmers cross all the time, but still need a permit, and we work with them to tell them, hey, here's what the policies are now, et cetera. But with that said, this floodplain, replacing it really doesn't do any major change to what we're doing now in terms of the effect on the farm.
Farmers are not exempt from flood.
But they're not. I mean, they would.
No, but that's what I was kind of curious, because you're not gonna get a permit for a grain bin or a metal building or something because they don't have to, and then how's that?
And that's one of the issues that I know, like on the wind tower, I was talking to a guy today, and he said that the county was going to have to, or this property owner was gonna have to take down a structure, because it was within so many feet of flight path of an airport, but they didn't check, and, because they didn't, because they're exempt from local zoning, but they're not exempt from FAA regulations, and so, I mean, that's kind of causing an issue. It's causing an issue, I would assume, for the assessors across the state. Like, how are we supposed to pick up value for property that we don't even know exists?
That's one of the things I have in my mind to bring up once this COVID's completely gone and we get back with our zoning colleagues and various meetings and everything. That's one of the top questions, and my top 3 questions are, how are we going to handle this regulatory of the floodplain, especially now that grain bins are coming in there when they are not permitted in that way. But it's clear as day in our ordinances, it's clear as day in Iowa code, but that is the challenge there. If, we get it adopted in our mind. The only thing we have in our favor right now is people are more used to calling for the permits that have done it in the past. So maybe the memo hasn't got out there enough that you don't need the permit. So we get those regularly. We need a permit.
And one thing that might catch it too is, well, just insurability. If their insurance isn't gonna cover a building in the floodplain or a grain bin, that might help not create as much of a problem for you guys.
That is a very good point. The bank is always kind of that one stakeholder there that does catch it. And now that you say, now that you say that, I'm thinking back to several phone calls. So any farmer that has to deal with banking or a loan, that will be the kind of the catch-22.
Okay.
Well, Dan, you've done a really good job on all this, I just wanted to, let you guys.
2512, it's just an ag
Dan's
exemption.
really good at this.
Yeah,
The
it's,
floodplain is not my favorite thing.
she signed it in
It's
law.
kind of dry.
But
Mark,
Dan's really good at it, and he works very well with Bill Capuccio, and, I kind of look at this as like, basically like.
That's why
we're just pretty much.
you're on the board, actually.
So we're all seeing the same.
Well,
words,
no, you were
singing off the
basically,
same sheet of music.
Right.
the requirement for positions on the board. Sorry, he asked about House File 2512, and it changed, it was ag exemption. The board members have to consist of members from the unincorporated area. Prior to that, it could include, what, a percentage from in-town? or-
Yeah, we could have people.
You could have people from Sioux City, Sergeant Bluff serving on this board. They changed it, that you have to live in the unincorporated area to serve on this board and the Board of Adjustment.
Wasn't Board of Adjustments always that?
No,
No.
I think they like to have at least 2/3, or
We
they
had-
look for members from,
Yeah, we had a gender balance and a rural city kind of balance.
I remember.
But that was a local decision, it wasn't required by code. But yeah, and then, that happened during at like the height of COVID, so it was difficult to find anything.
Yeah, I would say that one thing we learned from last year is I think people really have come together and worked hard through it. But COVID has been very challenging to definitely get the applicants. We thank you both for joining the commission. But it was definitely a challenge.
Okay. So you
Promote
kind
public
of know.
participation when we're saying, don't get together.
But sitting here, just thinking out loud, we should probably do some outreach and, do some workshops or go give some informational presentations to like County Farm Bureau, the,
Not a bad idea.
Livestock, Cattlemen's Association, those groups. And we'll have a presence at the county fair,
When do you want to come out?
whenever you think would be a good time.
We'll set it up.
Okay. But I think that is a good idea, and, after we get this adopted or passed, then we'll start doing the outreach and doing the informational and the education in the community. And then we'll try to go after some of those, discount points. But back to that one point that Dan was talking about, so really what they were saying is, nothing's really changed in this new ordinance, other than a couple of definitions, just so apples and apples. And then the order of some stuff is different, but other than that, it's pretty much the same from, so there's really nothing different. But they give you the ability to change it, so you know, we've already kind of reached consensus on the least restrictive or the minimum requirements, and so that's elevating 1 foot base flood elevation. We have the ability to require more than that, but that's just, you know, more added cost for individuals, and it's not necessarily required. And then, like, requiring someone to sign that letter, I kind of hate when people do that kind of stuff. But, I mean, it's not that difficult, it can get us an extra point, so, you know.
Right.
It depends, and, you know, the floodplain is probably one of the largest forms of collecting data and red tape in a lot of ways, because especially right now, somebody wants to build in the floodplain. You need a BFE. We say, okay, you need to make contact with the DNR. They call down to the DNR, and the DNR is backed up 3 months. And so they go through their calculation, and so somebody's planning out building their house, and they wanted to start it yesterday. And so they find out, you know, they're on a 3-month clock on getting that data so that they have something to get off of there. And so we need that data before, you know, floodplain development permits go out. And so that's kind of one of the challenges of the floodplain in particular. And so the nice part is they are doing this LiDAR flyover to give us the new floodplain. And the kind of the beauty of it is we looked at the net on everything, and the floodplain will go down quite a bit in Woodbury County. And so kind of the Buchanan area, or the, 210th, kind of Sergeant Bluff area, there's quite a bit of floodplain, quite a bit of houses down there, quite a bit of people are going out of the floodplain. So that's just one area that kind of strikes my mind. Then on page 63 of your packet, slide number 7, I provided a website link for you. I know this may have been shared in the past. This is the preliminary draft map website, so you can have a look at the floodplain by address. So if you know of some areas out there that definitely have a history of floodplain, you may be very well surprised on how this 2-foot LiDAR has changed the landscape. So,
When was the last map made?
my understanding is that 2008, they did the ordinance, and I think they may have done something around 11.
Yeah, I think the flyover was 2011, 2010, 2011. I'm so
good
proud to
years.
say that it was Cape Katrina.
But from the meetings that I've been in, we've had a couple DNR consultants come up here maybe about 3 or 4 times. We've met with the city as well. The city floodplain hasn't changed to the extent that the counties has, but overall, they're very engaged. Once they start we're in the process now, so we'll probably hear from them pretty soon. And so they're in a process now where they're going toward the adoption, and so they're going to be handling the public meetings and everything. So when we find out those dates, of course, we'll share it, but I think they're kind of deciding on if they can go regional to different spots, or just do kind of one central spot. But that'll be a big part of the process. So like I said before, the DNR likes it that counties are proactive on adopting these ordinances kind of early on, so that it's a smooth sailing later.
So the last thing that I would add is that throughout this whole process, one of the neat things that has happened is, you know, back in 2010, 2011, when they did that 2-foot LiDAR flyover, a lot of people were brought into the floodplain. And the county we commissioned and paid for a hydrology study, a floodplain study for a portion of the county, and it showed, using better data, better technology, that a large portion of FEMA's maps shouldn't be in it. Individual property owners were having to go pay land surveyors, engineers, and work with FEMA to get out of it, and it costs them money to get out of it. And, you know, we sat here and said, we have data that shows, you know, this should be out of it, and they wouldn't accept it. And it took years and years and years of pressing them and asking, looking for dollars, and they finally entertained accepting our data, incorporating it into this study. And so that's a win for us, I feel like, So a number of people in the Hornick area will be brought out, and if they choose to, obtain flood insurance, it'll be significantly cheaper. And then if we're able to get some more discount points, that just helps everybody in the county that buys that insurance. So that's pretty much it. I mean, I think in all, we're not gonna have a whole lot of angry people because we're not bringing a lot of new people into it. And then in the areas where it's been, where there are changes, we've been working with landowners. So.
Yeah, that would be kind of the reflection of the study there.
The blue is the BF
Mhm.
area.
Okay.
Okay, at this stage, do you need anything more from us, Dave or Dan?
No, that's pretty much it. Dan's just giving them a before and after screenshot, but that's it, Chris.
Okay. Do you want to move on to item number 6 then?
Yes, please.
Okay. Any other public comment on matters not on the agenda?
Don't believe so.
Hearing none, we're going to go on to number 7, commissioner comments or inquiries.
How was Southern today?
How was what?
How was substituting?
We heard you were at school
hear what you
substituting. We heard you were at school substituting today.
Oh, yes, I was. It was good. Special ed today. Thanks for asking. Okay, so commissioners, I'm not hearing any other comments or inquiries. Are we ready to adjourn?
Yes, ma'am. I'll make a motion to
Okay, I
adjourn.
heard-
Oh, sorry, Chris.
Okay, how about a second? I think I heard somebody else.
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Sounds like meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, everyone. You bet. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
So was, Point Road home on when you were on? Ken Gard?
I'm hearing you on the radio and on the news probably more